Welcome back. You're still watching The Breakfast Show, and we're now doing our press review where we go over the major headlines that made Egyptian newspapers today. And I'm pleased to have with me Professor Saeed Sadiq, Professor of Sociology at the American University in Cairo. Good morning, sir. Welcome.
Good morning, my dear.
Today, of course, is a very special day for Egyptians. It marks the 30th anniversary of the Sinai Liberation Day. 30 years have passed since Egypt has regained full control of the Sinai Peninsula after years of Israeli occupation. Of course, there is a headline in the newspapers, and the Ahram newspaper says the armed forces commemorates the 30th anniversary of freeing Sinai. Field Marshal Hussein Tantawi lays a wreath of flowers on the unknown soldier's tomb in Nasr City.
Happy Sinai Day. And we wish we could have celebrated that in Sharm el-Sheikh, snorkeling and swimming. That would be the best celebration.
Of course, we all have to go to work.
Yeah. The important thing about Sinai is what? It is 3 times the area of Israel. And Egypt before 1967 neglected that part, and despite the fact that it has a lot of resources, I would describe it as the lost Hawaii of Egypt. We could have exploited it much more than what had been happening. Since the revolution, you have seen a lot of disturbance in Sinai. It existed before the revolution. There was always tension between the Bedouins. We have about 13 Bedouin tribes, major tribes in Sinai. There were some clashes and tension between them and the police, not the army. We always had good relationship with the military forces and with the police. You have seen 14 bombing of the gas pipelines between Egypt and Israel through Sinai. And now we had this controversial agreement terminated finally, because it was economically unfair for Egypt. But I don't want to read into it as political disaster. No, it is just a normal economic problem, because it was not fair from the beginning, and it was one of the reasons that you had Egyptians are not happy with some of the Egyptian foreign relations that were made under Mubarak, not only with Israel, but also with Saudi Arabia. Remember when the revolution erupted, most of the slogans concentrated on domestic issues, but later on some touched foreign issues, especially Israel and Egyptian detainees in Saudi jails. And so it is not unique. I hope that with the politics in Egypt changing and that the strategy are changing, that there will be more equality in relations. It would not be as easy as it used to be. It might be back like good relations called peace, but with some hot rhetorics, but no more. Is it like the Turkish model, Turkish-Israeli model, or like Egyptian or some Arab countries? They have this kind of relationship with Israel. They keep relations secretly, but in public they have this hot rhetoric. I hope, and I don't think that any politicians in Egypt are interested in escalation. And the celebration of Sinai Day should concentrate on development.
Of course, there's a lot of development needed in the Sinai Peninsula, and this should be one of the main focuses of the next leader, which moves us to our next headline that made pretty much all newspapers today, which is the disqualifying of presidential hopeful Ahmed Shafiq due to performing the law of disenfranchisement. The higher committee for the presidential elections announced the final list of will announce the final list of presidential candidates tomorrow. A new law to be proposed in order to appeal against the decisions of the public committees in governorate. Do you think that Ahmed Shafiq is going to appeal?
Look, we have so many candidates. Many of them had no political potential. Ahmed Shafiq was one of those guys who had no big potential to make it anyway. So,
you don't think so?
No, not at all.
Even though he was very popular in the past.
He's popular in certain quarters. I mean,
but not as a president.
No, not as not a nationwide. I mean, this is a revolution. You cannot elect people who had you had the administration against. It is impossible. Some people may have popularity, but not nationwide, not enough to get them 10% even to make it in the first run, the first round. Even this famous Hafiz Abu Ismail, even if he was allowed to run, regardless of the issue about the mother story, which reminds me of Indian and Egyptian movies, you know, the melodrama and what happens and who is the mother and who is the father, and you know, stuff like that. Even if he had been allowed to run, I doubt he would have got more than 10%. I mean, those people have popularity, but in certain areas, in certain quarters, but not nationwide. Nobody has the capability to be charismatic. Disqualifying Ahmed Shafiq legally is problematic. Here it comes into a different problem. Had he been allowed to run, I wouldn't have expected that the presidential election to derail, like the parliament. Parliament and the Shura Council are also encountering big difficulty in the Constitutional Court, and so if it takes Ahmed Shafiq a low case, he can bring a low case, and most probably he's going to win it. And this would freeze, suspend, or call for a new presidential election.
So you think, so if he does appeal the law, will this kind of postpone the elections?
He cannot appeal against the committee because it is immune. It has Article 28, so it is immunized. But he can appeal against the law itself. And that it's unconstitutional, it deprives him of his right, and in this way, the whole Egyptian transitional process will be derailed. Because if we wait also on the 6th of May, the Constitutional Court is going to issue a verdict regarding the legality of the election that brought you the Parliament and the Shura Council. And if it also says this is illegal, then there will be no Parliament, there is no Shura Council. It can affect also the Constituent Assembly that will be made. So Egypt will enter into a big political trouble. Why we are entering into political trouble? Because those who are leading the transition are not revolutionaries. They are not the revolutionary people who made this whole upheaval. And that's why we are ending up with this chaos, patching, trying to make things work when they are not working from the beginning. We say from the beginning, Constitution first. Constitution creates institutions. Institutions do not create Constitution.
Yes.
This is the rule. Now they all discover that after the fact. And that's why you have this debacle. So the only option now for Egypt is either you make a quick new constitutional proclamation that would try to save the system. Otherwise, the transition process would be extended and SCAF may be overstayed.
We're going to see what's going to happen in the next period. This brings us to our next headline. 2 solutions suggested to solve conflicts regarding the Constitutional Assembly before tomorrow's meeting between the political powers and the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces. Member of the Parliament, Dr. Wahid Abdelmajid, says that disagreements are still present between the various political forces regarding the formation of the Constitutional Assembly and the process of voting upon constitutional articles. The Salafist Noor Party, as well as a number of liberals, suggest forming the assembly from outside the parliament. What is your comment on this? There's been like a lot of controversy, a lot of debate about this Constitutional Assembly, which is very important because, as you said, Constitution has to be drafted before the president is elected.
The most important thing for any constitution is that it must uphold human rights. All international declarations regarding human rights and the mechanism to honor them. It's not enough that I say I respect human rights, we want to respect the human rights of minorities, women, handicapped, whatever, but I must have also mechanism to to court anybody who tries to manipulate it. As you know, many Egyptians are alarmed about the Salafi and the Islamic trend in general because their vision about human rights are very different. they want to apply whatever that suits them, and they think it is okay. Women are scared, the minorities are scared, moderate Muslims are scared of them, and I'm glad that the Salafi is the one that is trying to say, especially in New, they are saying we want people from outside the parliament, and this is good development that they are changing. And I think political Islam is changing, and they are realizing the trouble. In fact, one of the reasons we have transition trouble also is not only the mismanagement, but also the greed, political greed coming from political Islam. Those people felt all of a sudden they are in power, and they want to devour everything. They want to devour the parliament, the Shura Council, the Constituent Assembly, and that's why they began to lose the popularity. When I was coming here, the taxi driver was telling me, I voted for the Muslim Brotherhood. Now I have seen the real face. Next time I will not vote for them, and that is very important.
So they have lost a lot of trust from the public as a result of what has been happening lately.
Of course, because they began to appear, I mean, they say that we are the people of God. Okay, the people of God are not so greedy. They do not go after seats, and they are dying and even doing everything, including, rejecting obvious fact like the sun. Look, for example, Hazm Abu Ismail, for example, and the case. And
do you think this is going to give a bad connotation to Islam abroad from the West?
Well, Islam has
unrelated.
There is a difference between Islam and political Islam. There is also trouble between some Islamists who have identity crisis when they immigrate. I remember the Australian Prime Minister recently had a very strong statement against those Islamists in Australia who want to impose the culture on the Australian society, which is again really strange.
Very weird.
And she told them bluntly, if you don't like our culture, please go back. You have the whole globe.
Exactly.
You have the same problem in London. You have the same problem in France. Some people who want to impose the culture, I don't want the culture to melt, or to disappear. But at the same time, they cannot also clash with that society. You cannot go in Paris in the Champs-Élysées and you decide to wear the niqab, for example, in a secular. Why do you come there? Why don't you go to Kabul and enjoy it? I hope they reach any decision regarding the Constituent Assembly before the Parliament is dissolved or anything happens, because it can be another problem.
Cause a really big hassle. Moving on to the next headline, still on Al Ahram newspaper. Ranging from the sun, the horse, the Aries, and the eagle, the presidential candidate's symbols have meanings and indications. Presidential hopeful Amr Moussa chose the symbol of the sun, showing extreme self-confidence. Abdel Menem Abdel Futuh chose the horse as a sign of going through hurdles one after the other. The Muslim Brotherhood's candidate Dr. Mohammed Morsi chose the scale symbol, which is the same symbol chosen by the Freedom and Justice parties in the legislative elections.
Why symbols? I have 40% illiteracy rate. And so people, how can they vote? So they tell them, if you can't see the name, you cannot read, you just follow the symbol. And you have also people who are suggesting, why do you allow illiterates to vote? Again, it's
another issue to talk about.
Yeah, it would violate human rights. I mean, democracy is a learning process. So I have to integrate even the illiterate, campaigning, educating them so that they vote.
Next headline, more international relations headline reads, Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Saud Al Faisal vows to solve Al Ghizawi's problem. Al Faisal's promise came during a telephone call he conducted with presidential candidate Amr Moussa. Egypt's ambassador to Riyadh, Mahmoud Aoub, states that there are no court rules in absentia against the Egyptian lawyer Ahmed Al Ghizawi and that his wife was released on bail.
One of the important slogans of the Egyptian revolution was human dignity. Under President Mubarak, Egyptians abroad and inside also the country suffered human rights violation. And it was a policy of the government, not to escalate any issue like that. So when the Egyptian revolution erupted, as I mentioned before, there were many talk, some countries were mentioned and attacked and criticized. I remember a demonstration in Tahrir with women demonstrating for the Egyptian detainees in Saudi Arabia. We don't know what are the details. Were those guys criminal, terrorists, or whatever? It was not clear. But they were mentioning this issue. Now, this case appeared now, and you began to see public opinion mobilized, social networks, demonstration in the street, media attacks. And it was cleared yesterday, I think, by the Saudi ambassador in a TV interview. And he mentioned that this case is not true. I mean, a lot of the details are not true, and I think it would be resolved. But regardless of the details, the issue that the fact that you get so many people going to the Saudi embassy, a lot of attack, that shows you that there is a segment of public opinion that has resentment against Saudi Arabia. Either people who had worked in Saudi Arabia and suffered, and I don't think that Saudi Arabia or many of the Gulf countries have very strong human rights culture or labor rights. And so a lot of people who had been suffered, and whenever somebody complains, they will always take the side of the victim regardless of what happened. And so that is very important. Public opinion today is in Egypt is no longer the public opinion under Mubarak. It will not accept any kind of violation, and that is a warning to many foreign countries. The parliament can be activated, demonstration can take place. And
a lot of demonstrations have been taking place.
And they are not manipulated by the government. And this is, I mean, in the past, the government used to control what public opinion outbursts can happen. Today, you cannot. Today, if somebody puts on Facebook, let's go for a demonstration, or Twitter, then you will have it. And you will have all kinds of attacks. I mean, if the accusation that this guy attacked the king or criticized the king, you have seen the amount of attack and mockery that was put on Facebook on many, even in front of the Saudi embassy against the monarch. Even they don't care. Again, this is now the problem is that public opinion in Egypt is changing. In the past, it was ignored. Today, it counts. Today,
They're
it counts.
Starting to pay attention to the demonstration.
So even the government has to take that into account. In the past, they didn't care. They ignored public opinion. They thought you are taken for granted. Today, you cannot ignore Egyptian public opinion. It can make trouble, and it can do a lot of trouble.
Moving on to a West newspaper. First page says negotiations through the telephone to re-export natural gas to Israel. Eastern Mediterranean company suggests settling its debts in 10 years' time with the condition of re-exporting gas. The company's debts amount to more than 879 million pounds due to raising the prices from $1.5 to $3 per million units.
There is no spillover on Egyptian-Israeli relations over this issue. I think there is an attempt by both sides, to contain it. But you have, of course, politicians who want to exploit it either because of election, domestic issues. Some politicians also use that. I mean, if you have a domestic trouble, one way to escape from domestic trouble is you jump into international arena, causing, trouble or anything
make it bigger.
Yeah, externalizing the enemy. So sometimes a country that has internal tension, they want to channel it out by exaggerating that, or trying to play Superman, the hero, this and standing rhetoric. Again, it is still rhetoric. I doubt anybody in Egypt or Israel want to escalate into anything. What you will have maybe rhetorics here and there, media campaign, columns here and there, and that's it. Period. I don't think the public opinion in Egypt is ready for any conflict with Israel. You may have some people who want to escalate the rhetoric, even the most fanatic of them. It is just rhetoric or symbolic acts, but period.
Hopefully it doesn't get any bigger. Egypt's already dealing with a lot of internal stuff.
Exactly. As you mentioned, this is correct. the internal situation is more important to the Egyptians than any external situation.
Our next headline reads, the Parliament rejects Al-Ganzouri's statement and demands the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces to sack the cabinet. The Parliament prepared a report through the Council's member engineer, Ashraf Thabit, who contradicted Prime Minister Kamal Ganzouri's statement.
Now, if the government or if the Constitutional Court is going to dismiss the Parliament, now the Parliament is escalating and it rejects the statement of Al-Ganzouri, and they have done that before already. Now, rejecting this statement of the cabinet means relationship between the Parliament and the government, so it is the end of that relations. And so we are entering into a real crisis, a political crisis. The government has a policy and the Parliament rejects this policy. What are we going to do? I think the decision will come on the 6th of May.
Hopefully, sooner the better. Professor Saeed Sadiq, Professor of Sociology at the American University in Cairo, thank you so much for joining us during our press review. With this, we come to the end of our press review. We're going to go to a brief report about the world of sports, everything that happened in the world of sports in the past 24 hours with our reporter Ahmed Nader. We'll be right back with more only on The Breakfast Show.